Hello, everybody. Welcome. I see some participants are joining us now. Welcome to this webinar about emotional intelligence skills in an AI era. If you're just joining us, please tell us where you're joining us from. It's great to always have folks, and I know we have people from all over the world. So if you could put in the chat where you're joining us from, we'll get into this in a second. Really happy. Again, welcome if you're just joining. This is our webinar on emotional intelligence skills in an artificial intelligence era. So let us know where you're joining from in the chat. So far, Austin, Texas is the first in. We have Barcelona. Welcome. Just chat us where you're joining from. Colorado. Great to see you. We're going to get started here in a second. We have London, Florida. Wonderful. Keep letting us know where you're from in the chat. The Netherlands, Portland, Oregon. Great to have the international audience. Tell us where you're joining us from and welcome to the webinar. We're going to start in a moment. Burlington, Vermont. Hello. So chat us where you're from. Always so much fun to see where the participants are from. As we begin, I'm going to invite us to just reflect for a moment about what brings us here. What is your intention for joining? And if you can just take a moment, we'd like to call this a minute to arrive. All of us are coming from all over the world, from so many different activities. What brings you here today? So just reflecting on that for a moment. This moment to arrive together as we welcome everybody into the webinar. Great. Thanks for being here. Again, let us know where you're joining from. And I'm going to get started with introductions here. There's just two of us speaking here in the beginning part, although we're going to really invite you all to be a part of our conversation here and have ample time at the end for questions. So my name is Rich Fernandez. I am the CEO of SIY Global, and SIY stands for Search Inside Yourself. We are a global transformational learning company that got its start at Google. With the Search Inside Yourself platform, which was a way to help Google engineers develop emotional intelligence skills. Because at that time, apparently, they weren't entirely clear that working with other humans was in the job description. And so we developed this platform at Google. I formerly worked at Google in people development. I was the head of executive development, which is executive education, leadership development. For senior leaders at Google. I left there, helped start this institute, and now it's 10 some odd years later, and I'm leading Search Inside Yourself, SIY Global, and we operate in over 60 countries all over the world. We've reached 250,000 people with our curriculums and trainings, and we're just super excited to be with you here today. My background is I actually trained as an organizational psychologist and spent almost 2 decades in that field, working in large companies, including Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, eBay, and then Google. And so I have been tracking the development of artificial intelligence and its impact on the human-centric aspect of the work we do. And I'm super fascinated by the topic and really happy to share any perspectives I can and be in dialogue with my friend Scott. And so with that, I'm going to turn it to you, Scott. Perhaps you can introduce yourself as well.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Hi, friends. I'm Scott Shute. Yeah, interesting. As you were talking about your background, I realized that I have this interesting confluence of events as well. So I'm interested in technology. I got an engineering degree. I spent a career in Silicon Valley, ending at LinkedIn. I was the VP of Global Customer Operations. But I've also had a spiritual practice, a meditation practice since I was a kid. And then at LinkedIn, I created my own role. I was the head of mindfulness and compassion programs, and did that for a few years at LinkedIn. I left LinkedIn a couple of years ago. I founded this company called Changing Work, changingwork.org, where we're trying to curate the best practices of conscious business and bring them to the world. So I'm out in the world trying to help other leaders and other companies become more conscious. So excited about this topic.
Thank you, Scott. And so great to have you here. Scott and I know each other probably at least a decade now, collaborated many times, fellow spiritual and meditation mindfulness practitioners, and really care about those intersect points in this world of work. So yeah, so let's get into it, because I think the topic du jour, the thing that is really got so much of everyone's attention right now is artificial intelligence, generative AI. Maybe Scott, and this will be something of a conversation, y'all. And so Scott and I will be in dialogue. We encourage you, if you have questions or comments throughout the dialogue, to just put them into the chat. And then at the end, we'll certainly make probably 15 minutes or so to answer questions directly. Yeah, so let's keep it as conversational as we can. And so with that, Scott, the first thing I think is with the rise of AI, and in consideration of human-centered skills, what human-centered skills do you predict will be most in demand in this era of AI, and why?
I think it's really interesting. We could go a couple different directions, and we probably should. On the one hand, I think compassion and emotional intelligence is going to be critical, right? In a world that is just filled with information and filled with distraction, these are the skills that will keep us human. Like, this is the differentiator between AI and humans, at least for the moment. And actually, I was thinking about, okay, what is compassion? Right? Let me define it, at least one of the definitions I like. I talk about compassion as a capacity, because our capacity ebbs and flows all the time, for three things. One is awareness of another person, a mindset of wishing the best for them, and then the courage to take action. And when many people think about AI, what we often think about is, what are the skills that are going to be necessary? And people have fear sometimes. It's like, if you're a designer, kind of where we get to is that AI is probably not going to take your job as a designer. But the designer who knows how to use AI is going to take your job, or, be the most competitive one. So if we start to think about that, like, is it possible to be compassionate towards AI? Is it possible to be compassionate towards this technology? Well, it's awareness. Do we really have awareness of what it is? Because if we have awareness, we can start to work with it. Two is, do we have a mindset of wishing the best for it? Well, we might as well. It does no good for us to wish ill on anything or any event. And third is, do we have the courage to take action? And in this case, the courage to take action might be for ourselves on how to work with it and our own fear and our own comfort level. So the summary of all of that is, honestly, the same skills that have been true for our lifetimes in terms of our own development are going to be the ones that are true in this period of immense and rapid change over the next couple of decades.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think AI is going to be, already is. And there's a statistic that says 70% of businesses currently are exploring or implementing AI. This is a McKinsey report that just came out. 70% of businesses. So it's in our working lives. And as you said, there are some evergreen skills that are people-centric that are never going to go away, because AI is never going to be able to replace them. And in fact, we're going to need them more than ever. It is things like empathy, creativity, the capacity for collaboration, conflict management. All of those skills are only going to, I think, increase in importance. And as we were talking before this webinar, I think we need to double down on them in order to be able to adopt AI effectively. And so really, it's the two together, what I call combined and parallel development, that's going to be combined and parallel development of AI and EI.
Yeah, that's right. I started reading about AI, I don't know, the one that really hit me about 10 years ago was from Tim Urban, who runs a blog called Wait But Why. And he had done this long thing on AI, and essentially he had boiled it down to, hey, we talked to all these scientists, and about half of them think that AI is either going to result in essentially nirvana on Earth, or the other choice is the destruction of the human race. And he was questioning, like, why isn't this the only thing we're talking about? Well, these things are probably still true. And whether we go to one extreme or the other, for me, all comes down to our level of consciousness. So as people, as the users of AI, are we going to use it for good, or are we going to use it for not good? Just like every other significant and world-changing technology event that's happened, especially in the last couple hundred years, but throughout our lives. So should we double down? We should absolutely be doubling down on the skills of our own development, of mindfulness, of compassion, of the collective humanity of solving for the whole instead of solving for ourselves, because the stakes are going to be extraordinary.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think AI, it's again, I think sometimes it's mistakenly thought of as a replacement technology when I actually think it's an assistive technology. It will be our co-pilot. And so being able to skillfully work with a co-pilot, and incidentally, I think it'll also do a lot of, as some of the research is showing, a lot of the operational and repetitive tasks that actually leach engagement and energy from people in the workplace. And so if those are taken away, I don't know, I'm old enough to the fact that when I went to grad school, I had to go to library stacks sometimes and photocopy research articles that I was using for my dissertation, right? And thank goodness we got search engines. That was an assistive technology that greatly reduced my drudgery and freed me up for other things.
That's right. So Rich, have you seen with your clients or out in the world places where AI has actually affected the culture or affected the work itself?
Yes, there's case studies actually that are published and out there. For example, IKEA. Okay, so they implemented an AI chatbot, have implemented an AI chatbot called Billy that primarily deals with the repetitive and operational tasks. How do I get a refund? My thing is broken. How do I get a replacement part? And Billy has a very high effectiveness at dealing with that and routing the customers to where they can find that. The customer service reps, now you might be thinking, well, what about what happens to the people who actually did that job before? They're actually being reskilled by IKEA rather than being sort of operational order fillers to now be more design consultants. And that has generated $1.3 billion in revenue for IKEA because this consultation is now an important skill set for what were formerly customer service. Where, you used to run an organization like that, that it can be very kind of rote. So now working in that are not as much working on rote tasks as they are on creative design tasks for their customers. It's good for the company, and it's also for the employees. It kind of gives them that skilling as well. Yeah. So that's one example. And I think the other really interesting and prominent example is Bank of America. Here in the US has implemented this, and they've found with their AI-powered chatbot, Erica, 90% of, 20% of their customers are now using that when they call in, and they see 90% customer satisfaction and retention with those who use this chat. And the CSRs, the customer service representatives, for example, are now focusing more on helping customers develop financial plans or educating them about different financial products, more complex disputes, things like this that really tap more human-centric skills. Those are real, and they have impact on a culture. Of course, it calls on the culture and the people to adopt, to change, but there's opportunity on the other side of that.
And this is how technology has always happened. It's always started at the places that are at the kind of the bottom of the complexity pyramid. And it's usually oftentimes stuff that we don't want to do as humans, those rote tasks. So I agree with you. And, as we make this change, one of the challenges for us as society is how do we create the new jobs as fast as we're replacing the jobs that are, being augmented or eliminated by the AI coming up.
It's true. And in the latest Future of Jobs report from the World Economic Forum, when they kind of did a survey of businesses who are implementing AI, they found that they're expecting net positive gains in jobs after AI implementations. So I think the nature of the work changes, but there is job creation. And I'm looking at the chats here, and I see an interesting comment from Brooke, who was working with Microsoft on HR transformation. And I think that's exactly right, Brooke. I think that as companies seek to implement new technologies or even processes like agile transformation, the methods and processes of agile are well known and well documented and have been here for a little while now, right? We know we're going to run design sprints and do sprint reviews and have stories and epics and all that. And AI can help with that, right? But ultimately, the people have to operationalize agile. They have to adopt it, for example. And I think the biggest risk factor in agile transformation is the people. And so that's why I think people-centric skills, I'm just kind of riffing a little bit on Brooke's point here. People-centric skills, the ability to create psychological safety and inclusion, adaptive and growth mindsets, resilience, when the sprint review goes sideways. Like these things are mission critical to agile transformation and to change in organizations. And I think that's why I say it's more important than ever to double down on those people-centric, EI related skills.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even thinking about it from our own perspective, for our own kind of management of ourselves, moving from, look, I'll admit, I have definitely had times when I had fear about this, like, oh my God, all these things are going to happen. And, it's no different than the rest of humanity's lifetime, right? Or the over lifetimes. As we move from fear into a space of creativity, or if we move from pessimism to optimism, then as humans, the whole world gets bigger, possibilities get bigger. So then you start thinking about, instead of fixating on all of what could go wrong, like, how could this be good for us? Mm-hmm. Right. And if we start with this, I believe, this premise that in times of change, this is when we learn. In times of change, maybe even when things are hard, this is like the go time in terms of our, I will say, spiritual development. Like in many cases, maybe it's not great for us physically or emotionally or, mentally or even financially, but spiritually it's on turbo. And oftentimes when that happens, we develop the skills for all the other things to be great as well. So we start thinking about, okay, well, how could this help us be more compassionate? All right, I'll play it out. So, you're in a conversation with someone and you notice based on their facial expressions that they're feeling a certain way. And this is emotional intelligence. So you adjust how we respond to them. Imagine if we could augment that with some sort of AI, right? Imagine a world 10 or 50 or whatever years in the future where you have glasses that are like the Google glasses of the past, but maybe they're small enough to actually look cool. And maybe I get a little notice that says, hey, I'm communicating with Rich. Oops, that thing you said just kind of triggered Rich. I don't know if you're aware of that. Or Rich is feeling this. You may want to adjust. And just having a little augmentation. This could actually allow us deeper connections, allow us deeper awareness of others. So just like we have wearables today that help me with my heart rate and my whatever it is I'm tracking physically, imagine a world where we have wearables that get to the next level. What's my level of peace? What's the other person's level of anything? And allow us to make change based on that.
I love that. And it's a balance, I think, too. I'm seeing a comment here from Andrew Simon where pointing perhaps that could there be an over-reliance on AI tools by leaders? But what is that right balance? Because, and at what point is it assistive, to your point, Scott, right? Where we can actually notice our own selves or others where we might not have previously, some of the signals that are coming through. And I really think it's, again, it's that discernment, it's that consciousness that is going to make the difference between when you're over-relying as a person or a leader on AI tools. Because, I love that example. A leader will just throw it into ChatGPT, write an email that's compassionate because we're about to do a restructure and people are going to lose their jobs, press send without really thinking through it and really bringing their own authentic, heart, voice, sensibilities without bringing consideration of the actual people who this is impacting. It's too intellectually lazy, I think, to rely on thinking that we can rely on AI for good leadership. It's not sufficient. It may be assistive, but it's not sufficient. So then it becomes how you start notes.
Yeah, for me, it goes back to consciousness. What's the level of the person that's using it? And so if I think about just my current world, and how we've always done things and how I can use AI to replace all that, that's one way of doing it. But instead of that, how can I be thinking about, how can I use AI to make everything better, right? To make it better for the individuals involved, including our customers and our employees and our shareholders, right? Because if we truly solve for the whole, then of course things are going to be better. But if I'm just lazy and trying to figure out how to cut costs or send an email or generate tons of content without putting my heart into it, of course, it's not going to go well.
Yeah, it reminds me, and by the way, everyone who's listening, we today, not coincidentally, we just released a really, really neat ebook written by our head of product, Ryan Heinel, on people-centric skills for an AI-powered organization. And the research around it, it's essentially a white paper and a position paper on why this is important. And one of the really neat, and we're going to send you a link to this, by the way, here. But one of the neat things that Ryan did in this book is he sort of stacked EI skills and AI skills kind of next to each other, like a side-by-side comparison. And then on the axis on the side there, he has things like some of the business processes, like customer satisfaction and retention. What EI skills do you need? What AI skills are going to be useful? Agile transformation. What EI skills are going to be needed? How's AI going to augment? Product innovation. What are some of the other things? Market expansion, scaling opportunities, change management. So for all of those areas of business and organizational engagement and activity, what EI skills are going to be needed, and how will AI capabilities also play a part of that together? So if you take, for example, customer satisfaction and retention, which is like what we talked about in the case studies, IKEA, Bank of America, of course, empathy, right, is an EI skill. Psychological safety, inclusion, creating all of that for the customer in their experience. And then the AI-powered skill could be just your co-pilot, where it's thinking about solutions to the problem that may be arising. And you use the two together, I think, to really, really great impact. So I think that bringing the mindfulness or consciousness or EI skills and putting them alongside the AI skills is in many ways our assignment going forward. And what do you think?
Oh, I think that feels exactly right. Both are critical, right?
Yeah.
One without the other is going to be, having the mindfulness skills without being up to date is perhaps, there's a place for it, and it's a little naive to succeed in this world. And having the business skills or the AI skills without the mindfulness and EI skills is, a form of cruelty.
Exactly.
So we want the wisdom on both sides to be there and pure.
What do you think? I think there's a lot of fear and anxiety and resistance, I think, to the change that comes with increasing use of AI. Right. So what do you think? How do you think managers, leaders, people in organizations, how do you think they can best address that potential anxiety and resistance to the changes that come with AI?
Sure. Well, change in our species is not unique. So in one hand, it's the same as it's always been. On the other hand, it's happening a lot faster, right? The cycles are speeding up with each new technology. So it starts with being authentic. It starts with, sharing the things that we can share. And as a senior leader, it starts with how do we paint a picture of what the future looks like in a way that we can get people from A to B, right? Painting a picture that says, here's what this is going to allow us to do. And if we are creative as leaders and not just focus on how do we do what we've always done and just make it cheaper, faster, better, but focus on how can we all together do something creative that harnesses the power of this human creativity alongside the AI, then I think people will feel empowered. They'll feel empowered to let go of the fear and embrace the what could be.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that trust, empathy and trust, and creating the space, the conditions for that type of visioning together, that type of collaboration and co-work is essential. And again, you can't AI leadership, right? I don't think it's generative to the extent that it can replace good leadership. So I think, and we know, for example, I think it was Gallup just this year that released a survey on leadership that said, right now, only 21% of employees trust the leaders in their organization.
Wow.
Changes to over 75, closer to 80% when leaders are authentic, when they communicate clearly, especially inspiring visions, and when they have empathy.
Yeah.
When they're able to harness those human-centric skills, which again can never be replaced by AI. When they're able to harness that, then trust increases dramatically. And I think are all feeling like part of the same organization.
Yeah. Claudia has a relevant question here. How do you teach organizations that? In other words, this idea, seems to push us to how to replace different roles and skill sets. How do you teach company leaders that AI is here to accompany people's roles to make them more effective?
Yeah, well, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, for me, it comes back to consciousness, right? As the leader becomes more self-aware, as the leader becomes more empathetic, more compassionate, they can actually see that, in the world of conscious business, what we know is that if you create solutions that are good for the whole, for your shareholders, yes, for your customers, providing real value, for your employees, this is actually when they make more money. Raj Sisodia and the team that wrote Conscious Capitalism found that companies who do this are 14 times more profitable than companies just focus on making more money. It's counterintuitive, but in the same way, it's like, if you think about our relationships, if you're in a relationship, and if I think, I want to be happy in this relationship, and by being happy, that means I need to get my way 100% of the time.
Yeah.
That's not how it works, right? In relationship, when we create a balance, that's when, as individuals, we're most happy. So back to the leaders, when the leaders feel safe, when the leaders feel empowered, when they feel conscious, when they feel self-aware, when they develop some of that from the inside out, then they can do it for their organizations. But when we're looking at it from an animal perspective, a Homo sapien perspective, just trying to survive in what we view as a resource scarce environment, it doesn't happen. And so it's this move away from animal into whatever you want to call it, evolved being or spiritual being or soul or the best self, whatever you want to call it. So how do we teach it? It goes back to the simple skills of EI, of mindfulness, of compassion, of self-awareness, of psychological safety. And sorry, one more thing. And why, right? How do we get them interested in it? Well, it's sharing some of this data that says that leaders who have these skills are way more effective. Companies who have these leaders in place are way more profitable. Companies who solve for the whole instead of just the shareholders are actually way more profitable. So we meet people where they are in terms of running the business and the things that they care about. And then we move into some of these more softer skills, or the hard soft skills.
Yeah, the core, I call them the core skills, because they're core to us navigating the world and work and operating effectively in this complex, like potentially overwhelming reality that is work and the world today. And I agree with you. I mean, to answer Claudia's question, also Leonardo has a question around, like, is it just for leaders? What about other employees? It's for everybody, I think, Leonardo and Claudia. These skills are trainable. Emotional intelligence, mindfulness, things like empathy and compassion, that's not a fixed entity. I mean, there's some dispositional things you were born into this world with around those skills, but above all, they're trainable, practicable skills. And the more you practice them, the more you cultivate them, the stronger they grow, like any skill. And we actually have evidence for this, right? This is like from a neuroscience basis. We know that there are neural mechanisms, networks in our brain that are activated when we exercise empathy. The more we activate them, the stronger they grow. There's a lot of research that's suggestive of that now too, at a functional level, like neuroimaging shows this. So at a practical level, creating opportunities for people to understand and practice these skills, I think, in community, right, in cohorts, in a way as a cohort or as a community strengthens them. And we see it over and over. People can increase their emotional intelligence. People can grow their mindfulness and conscious awareness. I mean, think about your own life, those who are listening here. Have you acquired mindfulness, some mindfulness, hopefully some awareness, some different capacity for empathy and compassion over the years? Well, there's very structured ways to do this. This is what, Scott, you've led organizations that have trained compassion. I lead an organization that trains mindfulness and emotional intelligence, science-based approaches. And we do see the needle move. We have we've surveyed over 14,000 people in 25 countries who've reported that when they receive these trainings, their level of skill in these domains significantly increases. So we do that.
Rich, what are you finding in terms of when you go to talk to companies, leaders, whoever holds the purse strings and the influence, when they say yes to this type of training that you offer from Search Inside Yourself, what are they saying yes to? Like, why do they say yes?
Mm-hmm. Essentially, they're saying yes to helping the organization achieve its goals through its people. So what do I mean by that? So whether it's increased profitability, whether it's agile transformation, whether it's simply employee engagement and retention, those are some of the problems that they're trying to solve. And what we say is, we work on helping equip people to be their best and to deliver those things. Because those things that you're asking for could be really demanding. A lot of people experience overwhelm and complexity and high demands in today's working world. And so having the tools to navigate that, it doesn't mean that those things go away, right? That those really demanding conditions go away, but it gives folks navigational tools and helps them be their best, helps them have resilience and well-being, but also have agile and learning mindsets, all of these things that organizations need. Essentially, what we say is, we help your team members with their internal operating systems, right? We help people with their mindsets, their motivations, their connection to each other, to the company, in order to get the results that you need. And it's that symbiosis, right? That's what we present.
And I think most leaders recognize that it's still people, humans, that are by far the most important, the most valuable asset or resource that a company has. And that is, I think, at an all-time high. If you think about the history of work, right, where work, let's say building the pyramids 5,000 years ago or whatever it was, you had kings and slaves or indentured servants, and that persisted over time. Or you had landowners and serfs for the longest time. And then we had the Industrial Revolution and all of us working in factories kind of doing the same thing. And usually workers viewed as kind of replaceable. But if you fast forward into the technology age, the information age that we have today, when working looks like this, I'm at home in my home office. Many of us are at home. It's very different. By far, a company's biggest asset is the people. So when we think about how we can optimize a business, any business, nobody's going to a CEO of a big company and saying, you can get rid of all your people. Just ask ChatGPT, hey, how do I run my business? It doesn't happen like that, right? It still needs all of us. And so in order to optimize whatever the organization or company is trying to do, it's optimize the individuals, optimize the people. And it starts with all the stuff you're talking about, Rich, all these tools, these core skills that we need to build will still make every single organization better at what they're doing.
And just also, I wanted to add to that also one other thought, which is you and I sit here in the United States, and I know culturally at times in the United States, we've been rightly accused of like exuberance and optimism and like always like rainbows and unicorns, like, how it is, right? And the fact is sometimes work is really draining and difficult, and life, like it just kind of sucks the life out sometimes. And it's important to use these same tools to be able to acknowledge when that is true for yourself, and then know how to use them if it's helpful to respond skillfully to that set of circumstances, whether it means to take a break or to find a different way of working. That answer is different for everybody, but I don't want to suggest, because you and I think, both are big fans of the fact that this helps us be our best. But what being our best means something different for each person, for each context, for each life situation, for each role. And I think, and even within the same role, I was just having this conversation at a client last week. I was teaching and somebody raised their hand. They said, well, being my best on Tuesday might be different than my best on Thursday because I just got COVID. Of course, it is the case, right? So how do we be mindful? And I like to say mindfulness is about seeing things clearly as they are rather than as they must be. And so one of the definitions of mindfulness. And so inhabiting that, just that, true for AI, true for what it means to show up as your whole self, and whole is really different at different points in time. Again, the last thing, I'll just connect that last thought to the thread of people-centric skills. That's why, for ourselves personally, and then for managers and leaders, having that people-centric understanding and skill set, the empathy, the compassion, is critical. And this is probably a good moment for me to say we have a lot of this kind of codified and written in this ebook that Ryan, our head of product, Ryan Heinel, created. So I'm going to ask that we put that link in there, because we have also members of our team, Carlin and Grace, who are in the background. You don't see them, but we're going to share that link with you here, and it'll link off to this ebook where we discuss this also in a lot of detail.
Yeah.
But what do you think of that, Scott? Do you think?
Well, so first of all, I want to acknowledge that, of course, the world is a challenging place, right? There's no doubt. You only have to pick up a newspaper, news browser to see all the challenges in the world. And, I'm a big believer that we don't ignore it. We don't put our head in the sand, but I also don't want to focus 100% of my time on the darkness, right? If I focus on the light, if it gives me more strength to deal with the darkness. So, of course, there are days when I read the news and I go into a spiral, or I think about the future and think about all the good things that go wrong. But that just creates more of the same, right? So I think there's a real power in putting some energy on what could be in a positive way. And even for people who have jobs where they're not inspiring, or it's by rote, or it feels terrible, it still comes back to this: it's a human experience. And any organization, regardless of the task that they're doing, can have more of the good parts of humanity in it, can have more psychological safety, can have more compassion. And even if I myself work in an environment where none of that exists, I can have it for myself, right? So these skills are never wasted, right? They're never wasted. And if enough of us are there and believe and do it, then we collectively do change the world from the inside out, or change work from the inside out.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's probably that time where we want to open it up for questions. I think there's already some questions in the chat. Do we know of any AI platforms or programs to suggest to train and develop people? Well, I admittedly will say that I have primarily just been playing a lot with ChatGPT, and when you query it, it really, as we know, you get what you get out what you put in. So it depends on the query you ask, and even then, to an earlier point, whatever comes out, I think requires your own discernment. I never take anything verbatim from AI myself when I use it. I always have to think, how is this or is this not aligned with who I am and how I want to communicate and how I want to be in the world? So I think that's a really critical one. But do you know of any technologies that you would recommend, or AI platforms that you particularly like in terms of people development or things like that?
I can't say that I do. I would love to know them. As you say, it's a lot of this is who's developing them, and is there, back to the root, is there consciousness for the people who are developing them?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a comment.
I think that this is going to be the big discernment for all of us as we move forward. Is there's a dissolution of common truth, that's happening, right? We've already seen it in the different news channels, the different political parties globally. There's a dissolution of the common truth, and that will accelerate with AI. And so if it's up to each one of us to kind of, as Rich, as you said, is kind of check in. It's like, okay, does this feel right for me? Right? This, how I want to use this tool. So I'm sure over time, there will be more of, there'll be different flavors of these big AI tools, these big general language tools. And some will be built by people with different intentions than others, and it'll be up to us to kind of find those tools and utilize them in a smart and conscious way.
Yeah, exactly. I love this comment here from Angie, sharing a platform that she has come across. And I love the very last part of your comment, Angie, which is, but I'm not sure what the background of the providers. And that really goes to the question that Lewis Bates also asked earlier about, well, what the importance of cultivating EI amongst the developers of AI and other technologies. And it comes back to your very first point, Scott, like what consciousness is being integrated into this. We already know now the kind of nefarious ways, for example, that some social media companies use persuasive technologies, to hook teenagers, for example, because teenagers are vulnerable, and that intermittent reward system that hinges on kind of dopamine release through, the infinite scroll feature, for example, is something that was deliberately built in there through persuasive technology, what's called persuasive technology. That's a nefarious application. And I would argue that that speaks to the not very high level of consciousness that is integrated into the product. And so I don't know what guardrails we can put in place, if you can even legislate that type of thing.
Yeah, I think for each of us, it becomes a choice in what we consume, a choice in how we use the AI. So as an example, I'm trying to build a business, right? And so I know that some people use AI to craft, as an example, LinkedIn posts. I could have ChatGPT create 72 LinkedIn posts for me to use every day for the next, couple months. Well, here's the question. Just because we can doesn't mean that we should. Right? For each one of these things, just because we can doesn't mean we should. And it's up to us, each of us as individuals in our own life, of should I consume that? Should I watch that? Should I use that? Should I buy from there? Should I use these tools and work? And yeah, sorry to make it so simple, but it all does come back down to consciousness. It will be used as we are. Mm-hmm. So as we develop ourselves, they will be used in better ways.
At the level of an organization and a culture, I want to just read a quote from Ryan, who wrote this ebook, our head of product, Ryan Heinel. And it's a great quote, which is, companies and employees who leverage both the power of human-centered skills and AI-enabled power will have the competitive advantage in this new world of work. So it is this combined and parallel development, I think, that is more essential now than ever. All right, here's a couple of other comments and questions. And so Maithili is talking about a platform that she and team had recently developed. And then, there's an open letter to Facebook founder decreasing headcount on AI development, right? And so, I don't know, I think organizations are doubling down on AI. And again, that's why I think it's really critical to double down on EI. And if you missed it earlier, check out our ebook too, because again, we have all the relevant reasons why and statistics, because making that business case and showing the positive impacts from everything from productivity to profitability or to the core metrics that organizations care about is what I think makes the difference in being able to bring in the EI piece of it. The AI piece of it, everyone's just throwing money at it, but the EI piece of it, in order to do that, you're going to need to make the case.
And here's my dream. If we talk about, okay, there's all the bad stuff in the world, totally get it. And that gets most of the headlines. Here's my dream for all of this. I dream of a world, somebody says, does it start in Wall Street? I dream of a world where investors launch, investigations and revolts if the leadership team does not implement these practices, right? The practices of compassion, the practices of EI, the practices of solving for the whole, and not because it's just a do-gooder Silicon Valley thing to do, but because this is actually how the business will be more successful over the long haul, right? This is where I want us to get to, where every single leader, every single investor, every single new college grad who's looking for a company knows that they want to work for and invest in and work at a company that operates in a way that solves for all of humanity instead of just for dollars.
Mhm.
That's where we should get to.
I sure hope that happens, and I think it's necessary to happen for our survival as well.
Exactly. I think that's what it's going to come down to. Imagine a world where, we have protests for all the things, right, that happen every few years that we get enraged about as a society. This may be one of them, right? As the technology changes in a way that creates change in humanity, we may get to the point where this will become the norm, where we need to be fighting for the humanity of it.
Here's why I have some optimism, y'all, by the way. A few years back, and I don't mean to name drop here, but I was giving a talk, and another person who was giving a talk was Al Gore, who many of you will know, and I've been an admirer of his work on the climate for a long time. And we found myself backstage standing near him, and I just was like, man, this is an opportunity of a lifetime. I have to ask him a burning question that I've had, which is there hope for optimism? Is there hope? Are you optimistic or the opposite? And he said, I am so optimistic, Rich, because we have all the technology we need to do everything we need to do. And I think now with the advent of AI, we have even more technology that gives us even more capability to, people are talking about on the plus side, solving, cancer or so many other things. The challenge is a human order challenge, right? Because we have all the tools, resources, and technologies we need to solve the problems that we have, but it's the human order problem that we haven't really solved yet. And so to your point, Scott, like if we can have the kind of consciousness that does hold as essential high levels of compassion, empathy, consciousness, as well as as high as, growth on a quarterly earnings report. And those two are kind of reported together, that will be essential. The only small example I have of this in the world is the small country of Bhutan, where I've had the pleasure of visiting and working with some of the government agencies there. They have the well-being index, the gross happiness index, gross national happiness, just as they have, gross national product, they have gross national happiness. But I will say they've measured it, but they haven't necessarily cracked the code on integrating it. They've come more further than many other societies that I've ever seen. But I think there's still a lot of work to do, because their society, our society, every society, as we're witnessing in the world and all the events that are playing out, still has significant gaps in terms of, and significant is an understatement, in terms of empathy and compassion and understanding our common humanity.
Sure.
So may these tools and practices serve to grow that. I know, Scott, I don't know what got you into this line of work originally. Actually, I do. We used to have, I remember we had a lunch about when you had the compassion group at LinkedIn. But I know for myself, I do it because I want to meet people at work where we show up most of our waking lives and offer these tools there, so that those are the seeds of awareness that they take and cultivate.
Yeah, just to touch on, for me, why this work is so important. So at the highest level, I'm interested in consciousness, as you might gather. Right? For me, this is the most important thing. And I feel like work is the place that has the most influence in the world right now. So religions and governments have been trying to shape and have shaped our consciousness for the last thousands of years. But there's a decline in religious services and attention to it. There's a decline in our trust of governments and our belief in government. So what happened is these big companies and organizations have emerged, right? And if you go to work for a Google or a Microsoft or a big bank, you have to fit into the culture or you're not going to be successful, which means that these companies are telling us how to think about how to treat each other or about any issue that's there today. These companies are shaping our consciousness. So the way I think about it is there's 3.3 billion people in the workforce, right? Think about that. So 3.5 billion of us spending 8 or 10 hours a day, every day, being shaped. If we can shape just a little bit, if companies can become a little bit more conscious, leaders, right? You think about those 3.3 billion, divide by 7 or 8, that's how many managers are in the world, right? We know the data shows that the biggest factor about how we feel at work is how we feel about our manager. So if we can move the needle even a little bit on each one of these managers or each one of us at work, to me, we have an amazing opportunity to change the way, to change consciousness, to change humanity from the inside out.
Which is a perfect time for me to ask you to share a little bit more about your work, because changing work is your recent endeavor. So tell us how people can find you, please. Tell us about your work.
Sure. You can feel free to reach out to me personally on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active. And I have a book that came out a couple years ago. I'm doing speaking and executive coaching and teaching workshops. And most recently, I'm building this thing called changingwork.org, where we're trying to curate the best practices for, small businesses like me who are practitioners to make them more successful. And then soon we'll be curating the best practices from those practitioners, the best practices of conscious business, really, and making them available to business leaders, right? So if you are interested in conscious business, come to changingwork.org and we've got something for you.
That's awesome. And those of you that are listening, you know where to find us. We just recently released this ebook, recently, as in today, actually. We just launched this Build an AI-powered people-centric workplace ebook today. We'll include the link. I think we already did that here. So please check that out on this topic. You know where to find us at siYglobal.com. We're always happy to be in dialogue with you. If there's no further questions or comments, which I don't see any, if you do have any, throw them in there, please, into the chat. We have a couple of minutes left. Scott, we didn't prepare for this, but I might ask, if you don't mind, when we started our conversation today, right before everyone logged on, you asked me a little reflection, as I did in the beginning here too, on intention. So I don't know if you can offer us like a micro practice.
Sure.
End our time together.
Let's do it. I think talking is good, but doing is better. So let's do a, 3 or 4 minute practice here at the end. So if you're comfortable, go ahead and find a nice regal position. Perhaps take a deep breath, long, deep breath in. Close your eyes, long, slow exhale. And perhaps just be aware of your own intention with this topic moving forward. What is it you'd like it to mean to you, this world of AI and EI? Perhaps be aware of how you've felt about it to this point. It's an opportunity to move, perhaps, from one state to another. What might your unique role in this life be to combine the two? And how might you use this knowledge, these skills, these wonderings that we're thinking about today to enhance your own experience, your own life? And perhaps getting a sense of how we're all connected, the ones on this call, the ones in the place where you live, and extending that goodwill to everyone in our world, our universe, with the knowingness that whatever we do for ourselves, we do for the whole. Because even though we may be individuals, we are all connected. Shining lights in an ocean of shining lights, an ocean of love and mercy. Taking one more deep breath in, letting it all go, perhaps smiling. May the blessings be.
All right, my friend, thank you so much. As always, a joy and heartfelt thanks and hope for finding our way like this together. And thank you all who've attended. I see most of you have stayed for the whole time. Thank you for joining us. And may your practice and may your offerings in this arena also take seed and blossom in the world. It's all needed. It's all welcome. Thanks, everybody, and be well. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.